when my daughter-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone by calling me a complete loser. She didn't know I was the owner of the house, where she'd been living rent-free for 3 years. But what I discovered afterward was much worse. She was married to 2 men at the same time and had destroyed 7 families before mine. This is the story of how a retired IRS investigator got even with the criminal who almost ruined my son. And before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Keisha's fork tinked against her wine glass at 9:30 p.m. That sharp, irritating sound rang through the dining room like a warning of what was coming. I should have guessed from the venomous smile on her perfectly made-up face that something unpleasant was about to happen. "Everyone, I'd like to make a toast to my dear father-in-law Marcus," she announced with that syrupy public voice she always used, who just shared the wonderful news that he's unemployed again after leaving his job for health reasons. The way she air-quoted health reasons made her intentions crystal clear. Her perfectly painted nails caught the candlelight as she looked me dead in the eye to land the final blow. "How does it feel to be a complete loser at your age?" The silence that fell over the table was thick enough to slice with a knife. My son Darius's co-workers and their spouses stared at their plates, pretending they hadn't heard a thing. Nobody dared look at me, a widower of 68 who'd buried his wife only 2 years earlier. I set down my wine glass with surgical precision. My hands didn't tremble for even a second. 3 decades investigating financial criminals for the IRS had taught me to stay calm, even in the tightest situations. "Well, Keisha," I said, my voice as still as standing water, "I suppose it feels the same as discovering you're about to be evicted from the house you've lived in for free for 3 years. I let a calculated pause hang, watching confusion crease that otherwise perfect forehead. "Because starting tomorrow, you and Darius have 30 days to find your own place." Her face, the same face she posted online with smiling captions calling my house our home, went from smug satisfaction to corpse white in under 2 seconds. It was like watching a rose wither in fast forward. "What are you talking about?" she managed, her voice losing all its earlier confidence. "I'm talking about the fact that this house, the one you redecorated so enthusiastically, belongs to me, not Darius. Me." I smiled sweetly with the same expression she'd worn moments earlier. Funny how property records are public information. Darius dropped his fork with a clatter. He looked as shocked as she did. My poor boy, always so trusting, always seeing the best in people. It's one of the qualities I love most in him, and also what hurts him most. "Dad, what?" "Oh, son, didn't your wife tell you that since you couldn't qualify for a mortgage because of your student loans, I bought this house in cash? Your name isn't on the deed. It never was." I stood and straightened my navy suit, the one my late wife, Renee, always said matched my eyes. Renee would have loved this moment. She never liked Keisha, though she was too polite to say it out loud. "Keisha, you've been particularly unpleasant tonight. So let me be very clear. You have exactly 30 days to pack your bags and find another place to live. I suggest you start looking for somewhere you can actually afford on a part-time yoga instructor's salary." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Around the table, I caught badly concealed smirks on the faces of Darius's colleagues. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who found Keisha insufferable. "You can't just kick us out," she finally said. "In fact, I can. That's called being a landlord, dear. You should look it up." I took my hat and coat, warmth rising in my chest. It was the first time in 3 years I truly felt in control of my life again. "Thank you for a lovely evening, everyone. Darius, we'll talk tomorrow after you've had time to process this. Keisha, I'd start checking apartment listings if I were you. The rental market is brutal this time of year." And with that, I walked out of my own dining room with my head high, leaving behind a woman who'd just discovered that karma, like a good bourbon, is best served at the right temperature. The next morning I sat in my sunroom with coffee and the paper. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains Renee had chosen before she died. At 7:15, my phone rang. "Dad, what the hell happened last night?" Darius's voice was tight, exhausted. I could picture him pacing the kitchen, running his hands through his hair like he'd done since he was 5. Some things never change, no matter how many years pass. Language, Darius, I warned gently. And I think you know exactly what happened. Your wife tried to humiliate me in a room full of strangers, so I reminded her of her place in the world. You can't kick us out of our house. It isn't your house, son. It never was. I set my cup down and closed my eyes for a moment, gathering strength to explain the truth I'd kept hidden so long. Remember 3 years ago when you and Keisha were looking at houses? You were so excited about that little place on Magnolia Street, but the bank wouldn't approve your mortgage because of your student debt. Silence was the only answer I got. What you don't know is that I didn't co-sign a loan, Darius. I bought this house outright, $420,000, from your mother's life insurance policy. Those mortgage payments you think you've been making are rent. Every month for 3 years, you've been paying rent to me, not to a bank. The truth hovered between us like a heavy cloud. I never wanted him to know. I wanted my son to feel the pride of getting his own place, even if it was an illusion. I put it in my name to protect my investment. A smart decision, it seems. Why didn't you tell us? There was something in his voice. Not anger, genuine confusion. Because I wanted you to feel like you stood on your own feet. I wanted you to have dignity, pride in your accomplishments. I paused, feeling the weight of the words that came next. But dignity and pride are earned, Darius. They can't be given, and they certainly can't be bought. Keisha says you're being vindictive. Keisha says a lot of things. Most of them are worth about as much as her yoga certifications. She's my wife, Dad. Yes, she is. And I'm your father. But this isn't about taking sides. It's about respect, basic human decency. The silence that followed was long and painful. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller, almost childlike. What do you want us to do? I want you to find your own place, qualify for your own mortgage, build your own life without using me as a safety net you can abuse. I softened my tone because despite everything, he was still my son, the boy I'd held in my arms on so many nights. Darius, I love you. I always will. But I will not be treated like a doormat in my own house by a woman who's never worked a full day in her life. And if we can't find a place in 30 days, then you'll manage. You're 35, Darius. It's time to act like it. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sometimes fatherly love means doing hard things so our children grow up, even when they're already grown. Keisha showed up at my door at 2 p.m. the next afternoon. She was dressed in designer athleisure that probably cost more than most folks spend on groceries in a month. In her hands was a cheap supermarket bouquet from the discount rack near the register. The peace offering ritual. I'd seen it before. It was her favorite tactic when she realized she'd overstepped and needed to retreat strategically. Marcus, we need to talk, she said, sweeping past me to enter without waiting for an invitation. Her yoga-toned body moved with the annoying self-assurance of someone who'd never faced real consequences for her actions. Please, make yourself at home, I said dryly, closing the door behind her. Please, she began, arranging her features into a practiced blend of remorse and resolve that probably worked wonders on Darius. Let me apologize for last night. I went too far. Yes, I said, folding my arms. You did. I've been under a lot of stress. My studio isn't doing well, and with the holidays and everything, I let the excuse hang in the air. Your yoga studio that's been launching for 2 years, I said, lifting an eyebrow. The one that's never had a single paying client. A hairline crack split her perfect composure. It takes time to build a client base. I'm sure it does. I stepped past her into the kitchen, forcing her to follow me like a supplicant. Small power moves. Sometimes the small ones are the sweetest. Tell me, how much money have you and Darius poured into that venture of yours? Ballpark. I don't see how that's relevant. Indulge me. She shifted, those designer sneakers squeaking against the hardwood floor I'd waxed the morning before. Maybe $15,000 on equipment, marketing stuff. I nodded thoughtfully. $15,000 into a business that produces no income, while you live free in a house worth $500,000. I filled the kettle, moving slow, giving my words time to sink in. Keisha, do you know what I did before I retired? You were, like, an accountant or something? Typical, assuming I was just an old man who shuffled numbers. I was a certified financial investigator with the IRS. 32 years tracking fraudulent business expenses and unreported income. The color drained from her face like a candle snuffed by a pinch. Those were just practice sessions with friends. Friends who pay you cash, I said, turning to face her, my back against the counter where I'd cooked so many dinners for her and my son. Off the books. Unreported income. She swallowed. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Your phone tracks you. Your car tracks you. I have 32 years of experience chasing tax cheats, and you, dear, have the technological sophistication of a teenager. I smiled pleasantly, the way she did when she wanted something from Darius. Also, your clients post about you on their own social accounts. They tag you. They thank you by name. They gush about how much they love their private instructor. Keisha dropped into one of my kitchen chairs, the performance gone. She wasn't the confident daughter-in-law with cheap flowers and empty excuses anymore. She was just a scammer who'd been found out. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to understand I am not a helpless old man you can walk over. I am not your doormat, and I am not your meal ticket. I poured the boiling water over 2 tea bags. The domestic gesture didn't soften the steel in my voice. If you ever speak to me the way you did last night, not only will I throw you out of my house, I'll report your unreported income to the IRS with documentation. You wouldn't dare. We both knew I would. And she just lost all the power she thought she had. That evening, Darius showed up alone. His face was haggard, ringed with dark circles that hadn't been there yesterday. He sank into the armchair in the living room, Renee's chair, looking older than his 35 years. Keisha told me about your conversation, he said, staring at his hands. She says you're threatening to report her to the IRS over a few yoga lessons. A few yoga lessons at $75 an hour, unreported, is tax evasion, I said gently. No point twisting the knife. He was finally seeing behind his wife's facade. She's been doing 6 to 8 private sessions a week for the past year. That's close to $4,000 a month in unreported income. He lifted his head, genuine surprise in his eyes. 75 an hour? I didn't know. No, you didn't. I kept my voice soft. Keisha has been charging premium rates to bored housewives who prefer not to drive to a studio. She's been doing quite well, just not on paper. He stared into the middle distance for a long time, the old clock in the hall ticking steadily, like it had for decades. She told me she was barely making anything, that the business was failing. The business she declared on her taxes is failing, I said. The business she's actually running is doing just fine. He winced. We keep separate accounts, he said after a moment. She said it was better for building her business credit. Separate accounts, I repeated. The whole picture was coming into focus, uglier than I'd hoped. My son wasn't just a naive husband. He was the mark of a well-planned operation. Sit down, son. We need to talk. For the next hour, I walked him through the reality of his marriage. The hidden income, the tax evasion, the fact that he'd been living on a teacher's salary while his wife stashed cash in accounts he didn't know existed. I feel like an idiot, he said finally, head in his hands. You're not an idiot, I said. You're trusting. There's a difference. I chose my next words carefully. He was my boy, and even now I had to protect his heart while I dismantled his illusions. But Darius, understand, this isn't just about money. This is about basic honesty. Your wife has been lying to you about her income for over a year. What am I supposed to do? That's not for me to decide. You're a grown man. I stood, signaling the end of the conversation. But whatever you decide, you have 26 days to find a new place. That deadline doesn't change. What if Keisha and I fix things? I looked at him, really looked. He still wanted the storybook ending. He still believed love could conquer all. Maybe sometimes it can, but not this time. Then fix them in your own house with your own mortgage, using your money and hers, I said, all of it declared to the proper authorities. I kissed his forehead the same way I had when he was little, and the world was simpler, when I could protect him with nothing but a hug and a bedtime story. 26 days, Darius. I mean it. 3 days later, Keisha made her second mistake. She brought reinforcements. I was out in the yard pruning the last winter roses when a black BMW purred into my driveway. The luxury engine's hum announced their arrival a heartbeat before I saw them. Keisha stepped out first, hair flawless under the afternoon sun. Behind her came an older woman in an expensive suit, walking with the confident stride of someone who always gets her way. "Marcus, this is my mother, Patricia Alston," Keisha said, as if introducing visiting royalty to the peasants. Patricia was everything Keisha aspired to be. Perfectly groomed in designer everything, radiating the kind of authority that comes from never hearing the word no. She regarded my modest single-story home like someone examining an insect under glass. "Mr. Whitaker, I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Her voice had the crisp authority of someone used to speaking to underlings. Keisha explained the situation, and frankly, I find your position irrational. I set down my pruning shears and pulled off my gloves without haste. People like Patricia fed on other folks' panic. I wasn't about to give her a meal. "And what situation is that, Ms. Alston?" "This eviction nonsense. Keisha and Darius have lived here for 3 years. They have rights." "They have tenants' rights," I said evenly, "and I've chosen not to renew their tenancy." Patricia's smile was knife-sharp. "They actually have the rights of family who've contributed to this home for years. Keisha has improved this property, invested her time and energy turning it into a home." "Ah, so that was the angle. Sweat equity, property improvements." Some claimed that Keisha had earned partial ownership through her contributions. "Interesting theory," I said, unruffled. "Tell me, Ms. Alston, what exactly has Keisha contributed to this home?" "She's managed household expenses, coordinated maintenance, supervised renovations. With whose money?" I asked. The question hung in the air like wood smoke. Patricia's confident smile faltered, just a hairline fracture in her armor. "I'm not sure I follow. Every renovation, every improvement, every maintenance call was paid with my money. Ms. Alston, your daughter hasn't contributed a single dollar to this home in 3 years. She's been playing house with someone else's wallet." I stepped closer, voice calm and measured. "She's performed services any tenant performs, caring for the place she lives. That doesn't create ownership rights." Patricia's facade began to crack. She'd come expecting to bulldoze a lonely widower. Instead, she'd met someone who'd spent 3 decades dealing with people far craftier than her daughter. "Also," I went on, voice as pleasant as a Sunday morning, "I'm curious about Keisha's business records. Has she been reporting all her income to you, Ms. Alston, when you help with her taxes? I assume you do, given your concern with her finances." I tilted my head. "Do those returns include her cash payments from private sessions?" Keisha went paper white. Patricia's confusion seemed genuine. "What cash payments?" I smiled. "Perhaps ask your daughter about the cash-only side business she's been running. It's quite successful. I'm sure the IRS would find it fascinating too." Patricia turned to Keisha, who looked ready to sink into the ground. "What is she talking about?" "It's nothing, Mother. Just a few private lessons." "A few private lessons that generate about $4,000 a month off the books," I said helpfully. But I'm sure it was just an oversight. These things happen. The silence that followed was sweet as honey. Mother and daughter tangled in their own web of lies and tax evasion. Patricia Alston, who'd come to intimidate me, was suddenly confronting the possibility that her daughter was a criminal. "I believe this conversation is over," Patricia said at last, gathering the tattered remains of her dignity. "I believe you're right," I said. 23 days, Keisha. Don't forget." I watched them climb back into the BMW and glide down my drive. The battle was won, but something told me the war was far from over. The revelation came on a Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in the ordinary cover of a misdirected text message. I was having coffee with my neighbor, Elaine, when my phone buzzed. The name Keisha appeared on the screen, but instead of a call, it was a text, and not one meant for me. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Darius is working late again, and the old man will be asleep by 9. We'll have the whole house to ourselves. Elaine leaned over my shoulder as I read it. Her eyes widened behind her reading glasses. Well, she said dryly, that's interesting. Interesting was one word for it. I had others, but none fit polite company. I took a screenshot of the message and then replied, I think you meant to send that to someone else, Keisha. You might want to be more careful with your phone. The response came in seconds. Oh God. Marcus, please, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Come home. Now. 20 minutes later, Keisha burst through my front door, face flushed with panic and sweat. She must have run the whole way. Marcus, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, setting my phone on the coffee table, the screenshot glowing on the screen. You're having an affair. The only question is whether Darius knows. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're cheating on my son in my house while he's working double shifts to support you. I rose from my chair, every inch of my 68-year-old frame radiating cold fury. How long? It doesn't matter. How long, Keisha? 8 months, she whispered. 8 months, I repeated. 8 months while Darius worked overtime to pay for your fake yoga business. 8 months while he defended you to me again and again. 8 months while you smiled in my face and called this place our home. I stared at her, feeling a deep, controlled anger I hadn't felt in years. Who is he? You don't know him, she said, her voice trembling. Try me. Her face crumbled. She knew she was cornered. His name is Marcus. Marcus Duran. He owns a construction company. The name meant nothing to me then, but I filed it away. Experience had taught me that men who sleep with married women often have their own skeletons. Does his wife know? I asked. Her silence was answer enough. I see, I said quietly. So you're not just destroying my son's marriage, you're destroying another woman's too. I picked up my phone, fingers hovering over the screen. What's her name? Marcus, please don't. What's her name? Sarah. Sarah Duran. But you can't. I can't what? Tell her that her husband's sleeping with a married woman in another man's house. Tell her her marriage is a lie. Keisha's face twisted in desperation. If you tell her, you'll destroy 2 families. You've already destroyed 2 families, I said coldly. I'm just evening the score. I paused, weighing my options. Destroying her would be easy, but it would hurt Darius too. And no matter what, he was still my son. I'm going to give you a choice, I said finally. You can tell Darius about the affair tonight and end this farce of a marriage with a shred of dignity. Or I can tell him myself, along with your mother, your father, and Mrs. Duran. Her eyes widened. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing for once in your miserable life. I walked to the front door and opened it. You have until tomorrow morning. Either way, Darius will know. The only question is whether it comes from you or from me. She stood frozen in the living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Oh, and Keisha, start packing tonight. Affair or not, you're still leaving in 20 days. This just makes it easier for everyone. After she left, I sank into my old recliner, the one Renee used to sit in, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd learned. My kind, trusting son had married a woman who was stealing from the government, lying about her income, and betraying him in the house I'd bought to give them a new start. Some people, I realized, don't deserve new beginnings. Some people deserve exactly what they get. Darius's pickup rumbled into the driveway at 11:30 that night, earlier than usual. From my window, I watched him sit in the cab for several minutes before finally stepping out, shoulders heavy with the burden of what he knew, or was about to know. A soft knock on my bedroom door told me everything. Dad, you awake? Come in, son. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes hollow. She told me about Marcus, he said flatly, collapsing into the armchair beside my bed. I'm sorry you had to find out the way you did. Really, because Keisha thinks you orchestrated all this, that you've been trying to break us up since day one. I studied his face under the lamp's warm light. Do you believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore. He rubbed his face with both hands. 8 months, Dad. She's been lying to me for 8 months, about the money, about her business, about everything. I know. How long have you known? About the affair, I mean. I showed him the screenshot of Keisha's text. He read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. She brought him here, he said finally, his voice flat, to this house, while I was working late to save for our future. Yes. He stared at the phone for a long time, his shoulders stiff. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What kind of man does that make me? That I never saw it, that I never suspected. It makes you a trusting man, I said. A good man who expected his wife to be a good woman. I reached out and squeezed his hand. Darius, none of this is your fault. She says she wants to fix things, he murmured. Therapy, a fresh start somewhere else. And what do you want? He looked at me, eyes full of pain. I want the last 3 years of my life back. I don't want to feel like the biggest fool on earth. His voice cracked. I want to understand how I married someone I never really knew. People show us who they want us to see, I said softly. Keisha showed you the version she thought you'd love. The question now is, can you love who she really is? He hesitated. Would you if you were me? That one hit harder than I expected. No, I said truthfully. But that's me. This is your life. You have to make your own choice. He nodded slowly. 18 days left. 18 days, I confirmed. Good, because I don't think I can look at this house the same way ever again. 3 days later, Patricia returned. This time, she brought backup. From the kitchen window, I watched her step out of the same BMW, this time with a tall man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. Lawyer, I muttered to myself, not surprised in the slightest. The doorbell rang promptly at 10. Patricia stood on my porch with the man beside her, both wearing the grim faces of people ready for battle. Mr. Whitaker, Patricia began crisply. This is Robert Alston, my ex-husband and Keisha's father. He's also an attorney. Robert was everything his ex-wife was, polished, expensive, and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from winning most of your fights before they start. He looked over my house like a general surveying a battlefield. Mr. Whitaker, he said smoothly, I believe we should discuss this situation like reasonable adults. I am perfectly reasonable, Mr. Alston, I replied. Your daughter, however, has been committing tax fraud and adultery under my roof. I'm not sure how much more reasonable I can be than simply asking her to leave. His smile was thin, sharp. Adultery isn't grounds for eviction in this state. And as for her tax issues, those are between Keisha and the IRS. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. But being my tenant is grounds for eviction, and I've chosen not to renew her lease. There's no lease, Mr. Whitaker. Your son and daughter-in-law have lived here as family, not tenants. They have legal rights that go beyond mere landlord-tenant relationships. I poured myself a cup of coffee, unhurried. 20 years dealing with attorneys had taught me not to be intimidated by fancy suits or legal jargon. Rights like what exactly? I asked. Adverse possession, sweat equity, implied partnership in the property through contribution and improvements, he said smoothly, producing documents from his briefcase. Keisha has invested significant time and money maintaining and improving this property. She has legal grounds to claim partial ownership. It was a sophisticated bluff, I had to admit, the kind of intimidation that worked on people who didn't understand property law. Unfortunately for Robert, I'd spent 32 years working with lawyers who were much sharper than him. Interesting theory, I said pleasantly. Tell me, Mr. Alston, how much money did Keisha invest in these supposed improvements? Thousands of dollars over the past 3 years. From what source? Her yoga business? The one that exists only on paper? Or maybe from the unreported cash income she's been hiding from the IRS? Patricia and Robert exchanged startled glances. They were starting to realize their daughter hadn't been entirely honest about her finances. Furthermore, I continued, adverse possession requires open, notorious, and hostile possession of the property. Keisha has lived here with my permission, paying rent and acknowledging my ownership for 3 years. She has no legal claim to this home. Robert's confident smile faltered. The rental agreement was informal. There's no documentation. Actually, there is. I walked to my desk and pulled out a thick folder of bank records. 3 years of checks made out to Marcus Whitaker, with rent written neatly in the memo line. 12 checks per year. 36 total. All deposited in my account. The silence that followed was deafening. Your daughter has been my tenant, Mr. Alston. Nothing more, nothing less. And she's now being evicted for cause. I handed him the formal eviction notice I'd prepared that very morning. 15 days remaining. Elaine knocked on my door the next morning, her face tight with concern. "Marcus, you need to hear this," she said, stepping inside. "It's about Keisha." She looked more serious than I'd ever seen her. I poured her coffee, sensing whatever she had to say was big. "My cousin Rosa works at the county records office," Elaine said. I asked her to look into something for me. She gripped her mug like she needed its warmth to keep going. "Marcus, Keisha isn't just cheating on Darius. She's married to someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "What?" "She married that guy, Marcus Duran, 6 months ago. In Atlanta. There's a marriage certificate." My mind raced through the implications, but she's already married to my son. That's the point. It's bigamy, Marcus. A federal crime. Keisha wasn't just having an affair. She was committing a felony in my house. Does Darius know? "I thought you should tell him," Elaine said. "But there's more." Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if the walls themselves might be listening. Rosa also found records showing Marcus Duran's been transferring assets into Keisha's name, money, investments, even part ownership of his construction firm. The picture was coming together, darker and uglier than I'd imagined. "She's been planning this," I said aloud. The pieces clicking into place, the separate accounts, the cash business, living here rent-free. She's been building a nest egg with my son's paycheck and Duran's assets. "There's more," Elaine said, sliding a folder across my table. Inside were property transfers, account changes, partnership filings, all dated within the last 6 months. All moving money from Marcus Duran to Keisha Alston Duran. What happened to his first wife? I asked. Sarah divorced him 4 months ago. He left her for Keisha, transferred a ton of assets during the divorce, then married Keisha as soon as the paperwork cleared. Elaine shook her head. "Marcus, this woman's a pro. She didn't just fall into this. She planned it. She's done this before." I looked down at the papers spread across my kitchen table. Keisha wasn't just a cheating, lying yoga teacher. She was a professional con artist who'd committed bigamy, fraud, and systematically destroyed families for profit. 12 days left, I said calmly. "You're going to tell Darius?" "I'm going to tell everyone who needs to know." And for the first time in years, I felt the old investigator in me come alive again. The woman who tried to ruin my family had no idea she'd chosen the wrong man to deceive. The investigation that would ultimately destroy Keisha's carefully built world actually began 3 weeks earlier, launched by someone I had never even met. Detective Raquel Mendez from the Fulton County Sheriff's Office called me one Thursday afternoon, though not for the reason I expected. "Mr. Whitaker," she said in a calm, professional voice, "I understand you may have information concerning the activities of a Ms. Keisha Alston. We're currently investigating allegations of financial fraud and bigamy filed by a Mrs. Sarah Duran." It turned out that Sarah, the ex-wife of Keisha's new husband, had been building a case against her former spouse and his new bride for months. When Marcus Duran had suddenly divorced her and transferred large sums of assets to Keisha, Sarah had hired a private investigator. That investigator discovered the bigamy almost immediately. "The bigamy charge is clear," Detective Mendez explained during our meeting at my home the following morning. "Keisha Alston married your son in 2021 and legally married Marcus Duran in Atlanta 6 months ago without dissolving her first marriage. But we're also investigating mail fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. Anything you can provide will strengthen the case." I gave her everything. Copies of the marriage certificates Elaine's cousin had found, proof of the unreported cash income, the property transfers, Even the timeline of lies Keisha had fed to my family. The detective listened carefully, adding my documentation to what was clearly already a substantial file. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, closing her notebook, "we've been monitoring Ms. Alston for 2 weeks now. We have financial records showing she's been running what amounts to a marriage fraud scheme. Your family wasn't her first target." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean, wasn't her first?" "We found evidence that Keisha scouted multiple families as potential marks over the last 18 months. Wealthy widows with adult sons, single men with stable incomes. She targeted your family deliberately. After researching your background, you fit a pattern." The scale of it was staggering. Keisha hadn't stumbled into crime. She'd methodically designed a pattern of deceit, approaching families like mine with precision. "We'll be making the arrests tomorrow," Detective Mendez said finally. "Both Keisha and Marcus are being charged federally. The evidence is overwhelming." That night I told Darius everything. The investigation, the systematic targeting, the fact that their entire relationship had been engineered from day one. He sat silent for a long time as I laid out the truth, the color draining from his face with every detail. "So nothing was real," he said at last, voice barely above a whisper. "Not a single moment of our marriage meant anything." "I'm sorry, son," I said quietly. He shook his head. "Don't be. It actually makes it easier. For months I've been blaming myself, wondering what I did wrong, how I failed as a husband. Now I know I didn't fail. I was just the target of a professional con artist." 3 hours later, I stood at my window and watched as unmarked police cars surrounded my house. The look on Keisha's face when they cuffed her was unforgettable: shock, disbelief, and then that cold, seething rage of someone watching her empire crumble to dust. Darius arrived home just as they were loading her into the back of a squad car. He stood in the driveway, staring as his wife disappeared behind the tinted glass. His face was a mask of grief, betrayal, and quiet acceptance. 9 days left," he said softly when he came inside. "Take all the time you need," I told him. "The house will be here when you're ready to figure out what comes next." The final truth came weeks later, during Keisha's sentencing hearing, delivered by federal prosecutor Emilia Chavez in a packed courtroom filled with the victims Keisha had left behind. "Your Honor," Chavez began, her voice clear and commanding, "the defendant orchestrated a sophisticated marriage fraud operation for more than 2 years, targeting widows and their adult children in 3 states. The Whitaker family was her 7th set of victims." 7 families. Keisha had destroyed 7 families before she came for mine. Darius and I sat in the gallery, listening as the prosecutor laid bare every crime: financial fraud, bigamy, tax evasion, identity theft. The list went on for 20 minutes. The defendant researched affluent families, identified emotional vulnerabilities, and then infiltrated them through romantic relationships with family members. Chavez continued. She would create dependency, gain access to finances, and then secretly marry wealthier targets while maintaining her original marriages for continued financial support. She left behind a trail of ruined lives and stolen assets, totaling more than $2.3 million. The courtroom fell silent as everyone absorbed the scale of it. Keisha sat at the defense table in a plain orange jumpsuit, no makeup, no designer clothes, no arrogant smile. She looked nothing like the woman who had once called me a loser in my own dining room. When the judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison, she didn't even flinch. Marcus Durand received 4 years for his role in the asset transfer scheme. Sarah Durand was there too. She'd managed to recover most of her stolen property through the federal investigation. After the hearing, she approached Darius and me in the hallway. "I wanted to thank both of you," she said. "Your evidence helped secure their convictions. But more than that, it helped me understand something important. What happened to my family wasn't personal. To Keisha, it was just business." "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Better," Sarah said, offering a small smile. "I'm rebuilding like your son. Sometimes when someone shows you who they really are, the best thing you can do is believe them the first time." 3 months later, Darius moved into his own apartment across town. The house felt quiet without him, but it was a peaceful quiet. the kind that follows a storm finally spent. If you're hearing this, I hope you take away something from our story. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who teach us the lessons we needed the most. Keisha taught me that kindness without boundaries is weakness, and that protecting the ones you love sometimes means being ruthless with those who would harm them. As for me, I'm right where I belong, living in my own house, living my own life, answering only to myself. And that, I've learned, is worth more than all the money in the world. Now, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to stay tuned for the next one, because in it, you'll hear a tale of betrayal and redemption like you've never seen before.